Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi washabihi ajmain. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Rabbi shalli sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Majlis Maklulukan kedatangan yang berbahagia Profesor Tan Sri Dato Dzulkifli Abdul Razak, Pengurusi Lembaga Pengarah Universiti Sains Islam Malaysia. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dato Dr. Dzulkifli Abdul Ghani, Timbalan Naib Chancellor Akademik dan Antarabangsa USIM dan menjalankan tugas Naib Chancellor USIM. Yang berbahagia ahli-ahli jawatankuasa pengurusan universiti, ketua-ketua jabatan dan pegawai-pegawai kanan universiti, seterusnya hadirin hadirat yang dirahmati Allah sekalian. Alhamdulillah, di hari Jumaat pagi yang berkat Sayyidul Ayyam ini, kita akan mendengar satu bicara yang akan disampaikan oleh yang berbahagia pengurusi lembaga pengarah universiti kita untuk berbicarakan, berkongsi ilmu tentang satu topik yang amat menarik untuk dikongsikan bersama-sama kita. Bagi memberkati majlis kita pada hari ini, molek kiranya kita bukanya dengan Ummul Quran Al-Fatihah. Amin amin ya rabbal alamin. Justru tanpa melengahkan masa lagi, saya mempersilakan yang berbahagia pengurusi lembaga pengarah universiti untuk menyampaikan ceramah beliau yang bertajuk Leading Academic Institution Through ESD. Tanpa melengahkan masa, dipersilakan yang berbahagia Tan Sri.
Terima kasih saudara pengurusi majlis. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala alihi washabihi ajmain. La haula wala quwwata illa billah. Saudara-saudari yang dikasihi sekalian, Datuk Zul dan rakan-rakan, hari ini saya diminta untuk memberi satu ceramah yang bertajuk tentang sustainable development ataupun pembangunan lestari. Nah, ada tiga benda yang saya nak tunjukkan pada hari ini. Pertamanya, di mana kita sebagai universiti Islam dan sebagai orang Islam dalam konteks agenda global. Ya, misalnya kalau kita bercakap tentang kelestarian ataupun pembangunan lestari, apa perspektif Islam dalam ini? I think to me this is very important. Ya. Sedangkan dunia sudah melakarkan satu gambaran di mana letaknya hujah kita ataupun perspektif kita. Ini penting untuk memberi keseimbangan dalam kefahaman apa yang berlaku di peringkat global. Kalau tidak, kita tercicir. Bukan saja tercicir, kita menjadi pengikut pada orang yang membawa apa saja, ya, yang kita dah nampak ini banyak kali, ya. Perspektif modal insan, perspektif the fourth industrial revolution, mungkin juga perspektif pembangunan lestari ini, because we do not have a perspective our own. That's first. Second, this one is true to my nature. I don't believe in rankings. Yeah, and you can pay me R1 million. I don't believe in ranking because it does not work. And I want to show you why. Kita di USIM pun tak payahlah nak sibuk-sibuk dengan ranking. But tidak sibuk-sibuk dengan ranking tidak bermakna kita mesti menjadi corot all the time. Ya, kita membawa obor ilmu dan universiti kita dalam satu wadah yang lain, yang boleh orang lihat, oh, ini juga adalah satu cara kita membina universiti dan membina ilmu. I think that's, so we need to change the paradigm. We need to change the perspective of this ranking business, and why I think I want to demonstrate that. And thirdly, and this is more of my appeal to you because I don't have this. Bagaimana kita menggabungkan ilmu yang ada dengan ilmu Islam. This is your akli-nakli part. Yeah? I will show you what I understand from sustainable development and what I understand a little bit from what I've got bila saya bekerja dengan FKP di bawah dekannya dulu, Prof. Zul. Yeah? Macam mana kita cuba gabungkan, dan kita juga telah bekerja dengan Ustaz Yusof, dengan Ustaz Umay, and to get this perspective. Tapi masih belum mantap. Yeah? Kerana pada ketika itu saya merasakan bahawa kalau kita boleh masukkan perspektif Islam dalam sustainable development, dia menjadi lebih baik daripada sustainable development. It goes very far, and I want to demonstrate that to you. Okay? So let me just start very quickly, maybe dalam sejam like that, and then we can have some discussion. Dan ini juga ada kaitannya dengan bengkel yang kita lakukan semalam ataupun 2 hari sudah, tentang futures. How do you situate this in the context of the futures. Now, sustainability agenda ini bukan satu agenda yang baru. Ianya adalah agenda yang sudah lama. Ada pointer tak? Tak ada. Dia agenda dimula dah 1992. 1992 apabila kita merasakan bahawa agenda of global warming, climate change ini akan menjadi satu agenda yang besar. Bagaimana kita nak menyelesaikan masalah? Itu saja sudah kita dapat faham bahawa kita tidak boleh selesaikan masalah ini kalau kita hanya duduk dengan bidang kita. Saya orang sains, bercakap tentang sains, I will not be able to solve the problem. I need to talk to the social scientists, the humanities, and you need to talk to people of religious background juga. Now sekarang ini, that is the big issue. So how do you collectively work? So kalau USIM, we still think saya, fakulti saya dan saya ini je lah kerja saya, I think you are wrong. You are definitely wrong. You want to find out how do I cross boundaries between this university, this faculty, that faculty, and this faculty, and how the university cross boundaries between that university, this university, and so on. Dan dia juga bukan saja dari segi horizontalnya, dia juga dari segi vertikalnya. Kita dengan sekolah mendidik generasi-generasi yang awal sebelum kita. The first thing. So progresnya sekarang ini kita dikendaki. It is almost a global agenda. How do you then harus perdanakan konsep sustainable development ini? Maknanya dalam kurikulum kita ada dasarnya ataupun kerangkanya yang kita sebut sebagai sustainable development. Dan ini you can see has gone on for more than 20 years now. And people are still struggling on how to do this. And I think this is where we can draw in. Dia bermula dengan apa yang dipanggil sebagai the Millennium Development Goal. Pada tahun 1992 sampai 2002, nothing happens. And the reason why nothing happens because education was not brought in. And everybody still work in silos. So mula pada tahun 2005 bila dibawa the Millennium Development Goal selama 10 tahun, until 2014, where education comes in, then they begin to move. Why? The university takes a role. Universiti yang melakarkan inisiatif-inisiatif berbagai. Maknanya, kalau tidak ada universiti, tidak ada ilmu, tidak ada pendidikan, benda ini tidak akan bergerak. And therefore, university has got a big role to play. And dia ada 8 saja goalnya. From 1 to 8, I will just mention this because we have now moved to 17 goals rather than just 8. That's not important now because it's over, right? And because dia terlibat, universiti terlibat, you can see mula pada tahun 2005 dia menjadi lebih agresif, lebih aktif, sehingga kan bila kita menamatkan the decade of education for sustainable development, kita dapat banyak pengajaran ataupun pengalaman yang boleh kita ikut. Tapi masih kurang di universiti-universiti di negara Islam. Dan soalnya bukan saja kita tidak bergerak, tapi kita songsang. Orang selalu cakap tentang Saudi Arabia, one of the richest country, tapi sustainable developmentnya almost zero. Kita buat satu kerja misalnya to work poverty. Di Saudi Arabia kita bercakap tentang kemiskinan. Saya merasa janggal tentang negara yang miskin masih, negara yang kaya masih ada orang miskin. Bukan saja ada orang miskin, bila kita keluar saja 25 km daripada Riyadh, kita sudah dapat orang miskin. Kita sekurang-kurangnya kita masuk kampung, redah kampung baru dapat orang miskin. Ini dah within 25 km of Riyadh, you already see poverty. And this is a country which is rich. And what do they use their richness for? And this is a question. Bila kita bercakap tentang Islam, selalunya saya ditanyakan, where is your example? We have none, except for Malaysia mungkin. The rest of Middle Eastern countries are not part of sustainable. So we need to make some changes in this particular context. Now kita dah habis tahun 2015, and the goal pada 2015, you have to end poverty. Untuk mengurangkan kemiskinan. If you look at the agenda, the first one agenda itu nombor 1 is to reduce hunger and to reduce poverty. That was the first goal. Maknanya sampai 2015 goal itu tidak tercapai. And therefore, people are talking about what happens after that, so the post-2014 goal, and what can you do after 2014, right? Now, before that, I would want to just introduce very briefly what do we mean by sustainable development. Dari segi definisinya agak mudah. Sustainability ataupun sustainable development is to meet the needs of the present, kepentingan ataupun keperluan kita sekarang ini, without compromising the ability of the future generation to make its own needs. Maknanya anak kita, cucu cicit kita juga boleh mendapat benda yang sama. Hari ini we breathe some fresh air. We make sure that anak cucu cicit kita will get the same fresh air, if not better. Alright? Hari ini kita ada minyak, anak cucu cicit kita must have the same thing. So maknanya apa yang kita ada sekarang ini, the future generation means 2-3 generations ahead must have the same thing. Right? And that is not something that we are used to. We are used to thinking about 1 year, 2 years, at the most 5 years, at the most 10 years. 2 generations, maknanya 60 tahun kind of range is not. And that's why the futures yang kita buat semalam itu is very important, because it gives you a kind of an approximation where you're going to go. Alright? So that is important. So 2 things important. One is need. Need maknanya keperluan. Ya. 1 kereta bukan keperluan, 3 kereta bukan keperluan. 1 handphone keperluan, 5 handphone bukan keperluan. Yeah? And that's the kind of thinking that we need to inculcate in our and I think this is very Islamic thinking, very moderate thinking, and very much into the kind of lifestyle that we should be promoting. And second is a future generation, masuk ke ke masa hadapan, bagaimana kita menelah masa hadapan. That's one definition, and it is a common definition. And the common definition orang akan bercakap tentang. Tapi ada kumpulan-kumpulan lain, these are the scientists, talks about another definition which is also important bagi saya. Bukan saja kita bercakap tentang masa hadapan, kita juga bercakap tentang masa hadapan yang berkualiti. Therefore, the quality of life is important. And there's a quality of life of the human being is important first. Banyak orang bercakap tentang sustainable development is about environment. Oh, we cannot cut down trees, we cannot do this, that, Tapi around the trees orang miskin. Around the trees people are dying. Because you don't want to cut the trees, then people will die. Because they need to do some, tree cutting for the economic activity. So, bagi saya, if you need to save human lives, you cut down the trees. I'm not going to spare the trees, then that the human dies. So, the quality of life bagi kita penting, tetapi kita mesti menentukan bahawa the ecosystem is in a state of balance. This is where the mizan punya concept comes in. The balance between the ecosystem dengan the human quality of life must be the same. The scientists, the Worldwide Fund tu basically talks about this kind of a language. So we can say there are 4 things. The need is important, the future generation is important, the quality of life is important, the balance with the ecosystem is important. So if you have all these 4, then kita mungkin boleh mendekati apa yang kita faham tentang sustainable development. Now, why do we have this problem? We have this problem because the way we organize our society, including the capitalist society, is like that. Hierarkinya terlampau tinggi dan manusia itu diletakkan paling atas sekali, sehingga kan kita ada satu hierarki yang begitu rigid, kita tidak ada kesenambungan daripada atas ke bawah, and normally we compete with one another from one layer to another. We compete with the animals. You can see now this rabies coming in. Why? Because we are occupying their space. Anjing tu tak tahu mana nak pergi dah, dia duduk around kita, and we become the victims. And these are the issues that we need to start thinking about. Where is a space for human being? Where is a space for animals? Where is a space for plants? How we connect this together? A different kind of thinking. We don't occupy all the spaces around us. If you use a blue ocean strategy, this is called the red ocean. It is unsustainable. Kesudahannya dia akan mati. Alright? And people always give an example of a pyramid. Kita tengok pyramid Firaun itu very rigid. What is inside? Mayat. That's about it. There's nothing else inside that to make it profitable for human dignity ataupun the quality of life. Right? And this is what normally they call the egocentric system. Kita hanya memikirkan tentang diri kita saja. Orang luar, orang sekitar kita, we are not the least bothered. Alright? And therefore this system is a dying system, and we need to move into another system, and this is what we call the network system. I think you know this, yeah? Where human being is part of the whole system. Kita cerdik, kita boleh menguruskan, tapi kita tidak mendominate. We don't control, we don't dominate. We organize it. Yeah? So it's different, it's very network, very flexible. It's not about us, it's not about me, it's about us. Yeah? We don't compete, we collaborate as much as possible. This is what the silo system does not work anymore, because the silo system tend to compete. Right? It's a blue ocean, sustainable, and it's a living thing. It's very organic in its particular nature, and this is what we call the ecosystem yang perlu ada apabila kita bercakap tentang sustainable development. And it is a balance. Yeah? I just use the symbol of yin and yang ni untuk menunjukkan perseimbangan itu mesti ada. Yeah? The mizan that we talk about must be there, not only from the physical system but also the spiritual system, as we go and talk about this later. Right? So bila kita cakap tentang sustainability, 3 perkara mesti bertindih. Ekonomi, persekitaran, society ni manusia bagi kita. Ya? Dan manusia bukan manusia saja, tapi manusia dengan persekitarannya. I would want to break this down for the ease of discussion into manusia, society itu. I want to talk about culture, and I want to talk about the social being. Manusia dengan polisi yang boleh kita gunakan untuk memanfaatkan apa yang berlaku. So, 4 dimensi yang kita panggil 4Ps itu. One is prosperity, which is economy. One is planet, which is ecology. The policy that makes it work. And finally, the manusia and the culture. The culture bagi saya is extremely important. Pasal datuk nenek kita bila dia hidup dalam masyarakat dulu, dia tidak ada masalah ini. So how come we have got this problem? How come they do not have the problem? And quite clearly is we have changed the lifestyle. We do not understand our culture. We do not understand our values. And that values and culture needs to be brought back. And this is what the Mizan research is all about. Di mana agaknya kita hilang punca bila kita bercakap tentang kampung? Di mana agaknya nilai-nilai itu yang tersisih? Macam mana kita boleh bawa balik dalam keadaan konteks sustainable development? That is the whole idea. Yeah? And it has to link with one another. Yeah? And it also has to also be balanced. Maknanya nothing of this dominate with one another. Ya, ekonomi tidak boleh mengatasi planet, planet tidak boleh mengatasi manusia, manusia tidak boleh mengatasi all those things. It is a balance. It is a perfect balance that we are trying to preach. But the reality is not that. The reality is this. It's all imbalance. Baik ekonominya, baik ekologinya, baik manusianya, baik juga tentang geopolitiknya. And ini kita nampak tiap-tiap hari. Yeah? The question is, what do we do about it? What do we do when Saudi Arabia and Qatar is fighting? What do we do with Saudi Arabia and Yemen is fighting? Yeah? And because they fight, now the Israeli dah berani and go mengatakan pada orang, don't go to Masjid Al-Aqsa. Ini kerja dia. I think the moment there is a skirmish among the Muslim, the Jews will take another step forward. This is something that we don't understand. We don't seem to understand this. Yeah? Bila kita ada pergaduhan, dia akan melangkah satu tapak lagi. Dan sekarang ini, what do we see in Al-Aqsa? Nak masuk masjid, can go through the metal detector. And it's the same thing in China. Ya, sebab itu kita berhia-hia nak buka sekolah Cina ni pasal apa? Every Muslim nak pergi ke masjid di China sekarang ni kena tunjuk ID card dan kena sign in untuk semayang 5 kali satu hari. Yeah? And dia sekarang ni bercakap dengan kita tentang one road, one belt. Semuanya seolah-olah bagus, tapi the Chinese Muslim will tell us, yeah, publicly dia kata bagus, tapi dalamnya dia dihimpit. Because kita asyik dengan one road, one beltnya, we forgot about the Muslims in China. I think this is a thinking that we need to look. When they give you something which is good, you must look di belakang. Apa yang berlaku belakang? Tabirnya ada benda yang nak disorokkan. And I think that's the kind of mind, inquisitive mind that we need to go into. This is the world that is imbalanced. And half of this world are Muslim worlds. Ya, ekologinya yang tak sempurna, kemiskinan yang tidak sempurna, ekonomi yang tidak sempurna, yang bergaduh tak habis-habisnya, kita lah. And this will be maintained because as they maintain this, then they can go one step after the other. Yeah? You read the whole history of why Syria is attacked, you understand what is behind this whole idea of attacking the Muslim world. Yeah? Google the word window 2040. Yeah? Simple. 2040, bila kita tengok 2040, this is a strategy created by the Christians. Yeah? And 20 itu adalah the latitude 20 dengan the latitude 40. Kalau kita tengok orang the latitude 20 dengan 40 itu, there's all the Muslim countries. And dia kata, this is the belt that has not been exposed to the gospel. This is the belt that it has not exposed to the Bible. Our duty is to give the Bible to them. And this is happening in Iraq. The Iraq now has got the biggest Bible distribution center. Yeah? Every day they are moving in with this kind of thing. Dipermudahkan oleh the United States of America. Right? That is the other side yang tidak dibincangkan. Yeah? But this is the natijah kesudahannya. Kalau dulunya di sini, di the same lake, the Uppsala Lake, yeah, in 1928, this is the lake now, almost 80 years later. All the snow has been converted to lake. And my notion on this, kalau misalnya dulu orang Islam begitu jernih, putih dan dingin, sekarang ni kita dah cair. From the environmental point of view, it looks like this. From the spiritual point of view, it also looks like this, except that we do not see it. Right? And this change is not reversible. Bila dah jadi, dia jadilah. Kita tak boleh balik kepada nak dapat snow. No way. All you can do is to make sure that it does not happen. Alright? All these things that I think becomes an important issue for us. Now, bagi saya, why this happen? It happens because, quote-unquote, the university has failed. Tempat kita mendidik orang, tempat kita memberi ilmu, tempat kita mendapatkan hikmah, we just talk dengan Dato Zul tadi, tempat kita mendapat hidayah, sudah bagi saya not functional anymore. And that includes Islamic university so-called. Because we are not Islamic in that particular context. This ivory tower has failed, and that's the reason. And that's why saya merasakan bahawa university has got the biggest role to play. As much as I said earlier, sustainable development did not move until they put in education. But the question now, what sort of education do we want to have? Yeah? Ivory Tower ini actually is a film. Again, you go and Google Ivory Tower. Yeah? It's a CNN film dengan Columbia University, and kita boleh lihat bagaimana universiti akan berkembang masa depan. Dalam universiti, dalam filem itu dia menunjukkan everybody wants to build a big infrastructure. An infrastructure for what? For hiburan. The university has become another quote-unquote pleasure center. Yeah? Big swimming pool, rock climbing activities, Saturday night party, itu dia. This is how they attract new students now. And that's what the new university is going to happen. Yeah? And if you are not careful, we will probably also move around this thing, and this is where they rank you. Yeah? How many rock climbing activities have you got in your university? If you got one, then we will rank you number one. Yeah? And kita nanti akan terikut-ikut dalam konteks yang sebenarnya. In a short analysis, kalau kita lihat yang 3P tadi tu ataupun 4P tadi tu, yang dominant ini. Yeah? The economic activity is very dominant. And it is fired by the new liberal ideology and the human capital, modal insan, and the economic devices and stuff like that. I have no time to go that, but this is what it is. Universiti sekarang ini sudah menjadi satu kilang, satu gedung, ya, yang mengeluarkan produk yang dipanggil sebagai mahasiswa yang kerjanya hanya untuk mencari kerja. That's all. Kalau dia dapat kerja, kita successful. Kita tak dapat kerja, kita tak successful. Yeah? And we've seen this. And therefore, kita disuruh Vice Chancellor. When I was a Vice Chancellor lah, I hope it has changed. Yeah? You must have 80% employability. Kalau tidak, you are not meeting my KPI. Yeah? Bagi universiti yang tersepit, apa dia buat? Dia tukar date of convocation. Kalau dulu Ogos, kita tukar to November. Pasal kita kira employability selepas dia graduate. So you delay your graduation, you got better chance to show good percentages. Yeah? Non an academic exercise, menipu diri kita sendiri. And we have gone to that extent just to meet targets yang disuruh kepada kita. So this imbalance is what we need to look into, and how do we look into is where sustainable development comes in. Yeah? And therefore this is a escalating thing. Because of the economic imbalance, it translates into many other imbalances. And I've mentioned, I think in another talk, I think Oxfam this year mengatakan 8 orang terkaya, kebanyakannya orang daripada barat, except for one Mexican mungkin, yang mempunyai harta 50% of the world assets. Yeah? 50%, and 50% of the world asset maknanya 8 people has got an equivalent of 3.5 billion world people in terms of wealth. Yeah? And that number will decrease next year to 8 kepada 3 orang. And therefore you find that disparity, orang bawah ni makin lama makin gemuk. Yeah? Orang atas ni makin lama makin kurus, dan makin lama makin banyak. Again, many of them are from Muslim countries, whether you like it or not. Yeah? The reality is that. And therefore, kita mengatakan this imbalance, yeah, needs to be addressed because it's already part of the humanity, the state of humanity. Right? 40% daripada the world population, maknanya about 6 billion are in a state of imbalance. And what do we do? And this is the issue that I want to talk to you about. If we take to the very individual level, itu kita bercakap tentang kolektif, masyarakat. Tapi kalau ambil individu, this is quoted from the finance minister of Nigeria. Dia mengatakan bahawa an average African live on $2.30 a day. And 2.3 sen US satu hari. Average African. Tapi a cattle in Europe, seekor lembu, mendapat subsidi lebih kurang sama je. The African asked them, adakah nyawa kami ini sama dengan nyawa seekor lembu? Why are you giving us this same tariff in this particular? For them, it is not important, the life is not important, the economy being important. So manusia tak manusia, asalkan dia menjana ekonomi, itu yang dipentingkan. Manusia letak nombor 2 ataupun nombor 3 ataupun tidak bernombor langsung. And this is the situation in this particular context. Sebab itu kita lihat the refugee problem is not being solved because it's not an economic problem. Yeah? And benda-benda yang berkaitan dengan kemanusiaan tidak lagi dipentingkan, dia tidak menjana ekonomi langsung dalam konteks umpama. So the question now, when we say what now, is basically how do you think post-2014? Benda ini dah berakhir, apa yang akan kita lakukan dan bagaimana yang kita lakukan. Dan dari peringkat United Nations, dia dah ada dia punya roadmap. And how many of us are familiar with this roadmap? Today is something that we need to get in touch with, because this roadmap tells us roughly what is it that we can do as a university, as a society in this particular context. It's called the Global Action Program, or GAP, on Education for Sustainable Development, and the objectives are very clear. Pertama, dia kata to reorientate education. Macam mana kita pusing, education, pendidikan yang ada di mana saja, and learning so that everyone has the opportunity to acquire knowledge, skill, values, attitude, and to empower them to contribute to sustainable development and make a difference. Now, you look at our curriculum. Are we having that kind of a curriculum of empowering people to learn about sustainable development and make a difference? Ini soal yang penting. To strengthen education and learning in all agendas, programs and activities to promote sustainable development. Dalam kita punya strategic plan, I know one of the strategy is to introduce sustainable development in campus. I think we need to embark on that. Somebody who's interested on this must start, because this is the agenda that we'll have to fulfill in the context of the global, mungkin with a slight difference. So when we look at what happens in 2015, we will ask the question, it is not sufficient to focus on work on traditional issues saja. Soal ranking, soal competition, soal globalization is not as important now as the year last year when we talk about climate change, inequality, humanity, refugees problem. We don't care about the ranking and the competition, but that's a bigger problem, right? Now we have an even bigger problem of what we call Mr. Donald Trump, yang mengambil satu sikap bahawa America first. So kita bercakap tentang globalization, dia kata I don't care about globalization, I want to talk about America first. So kalau Muslim tak penting, kita akan sekat. Kalau Mexican tak penting, kita akan build wall. Kalau climate change tak penting, kita akan tukar konsepnya. And he's making a lot of changes that do not make sense. Right? How do you argue with this group of people? Now Australia dah mula, Australia first. Europe is beginning to think about Europe first. UK dah, bila kata Brexit tu UK first. So everybody memikirkan tentang diri sendirinya. And how do we respond to this kind of an issue? What do the Muslim do in this change of thinking in the context of sustainable development? So 2017, the crafting of the problems become different. It's not a problem for individual university, but the problem of how university can collectively work on this particular issue. Now, when we talk about the developed world sekarang ini, kita bercakap tentang the developed world sudah menggunakan sumber-sumber yang ada lebih daripada apa yang diperlukan. I put 5 Earth there, and this is a state of America. Amerika menggunakan sumber yang bergantung kepada 5 planet. And therefore they talk about world class. World class that depends on the resources of 5 planets. You give Usim 5 planets resources, we will fly tomorrow. No brainer. Now problem is, I talk to Roshada kata Tan Sri tak ada duit. Nak keluar nilai pun tak ada duit. Forget about the world. Here you are talking about resources, not only resources of 5 planets, maknanya you are taking resources from somebody else. And these are mainly from the developing countries and sometimes from the rich Muslim countries. The way Trump is taking money from Saudi Arabia now, asking to fight the Yemen war, Saudi Arabia now needs to borrow money to fight the war. Imagine a rich country needs to borrow money to fight the war. And that's how they bankrupt you. And that's how the Chinese is bankrupting everybody. I will be very, very clear about this because I'm going to write an article. Pakistan is already in the class of the Chinese. They buat jalan cantik-cantik, and then they kata, now you pay. Pakistan kata, I don't have any money. Now then I possess your road. Sri Lanka, the same thing. They built a nice port. Dengan duit dia, dengan Asia Infrastructure Bank dia. Nice port. Dia kata, okay, now you pay, we don't have the money. I possess your port. There is now in the YouTube, kalau kita tengok a program called the 6 Sense series, dia kata the next country will be Malaysia. Whether you want to believe it or not, you listen. And this comes from a Chinese billionaire. We'll build you so many things in Malaysia, at the end of the day, dia kata, pay up, no money, we possessed it. Pure economic and agenda. Alright? And that is what is happening when we talk about sustainability. So kerja kita is how do you move now, from that one planet yang that's burning into a livable planet. Forget about the 4 planets because it doesn't exist. Alright? And that's a mindset shift. Kita nak berganjak kepada kemewahan, kepada kesederhanaan. Bagaimana kita lakukan ini? And the formula setakat ini dalam perbincangan adalah education for sustainable development. Kita bertukar daripada that kind of an environment to this kind of an environment that we do not accept anymore benda-benda yang membazir, benda-benda yang mencemarkan alam sekitar, benda yang merosakkan, and so on and so forth. And I'm quite critical about this. I mean, this is a clear example. Yeah, if you look at our Senate Hall, cantik, right? Tapi tak bertingkap. Do you realize it? Tak bertingkap maknanya apa? Setiap kali kita masuk, kita terpaksa pasang lampu. Kita terpaksa menggunakan tenaga. Imagine kalau ada tingkap, kita boleh buka tingkap, sekurang-kurangnya kita boleh padamkan lampu 2-3 dan jimatkan tenaga. Saya masuk di bilik saya sebagai pengurusi, saya pasang satu twist, 17 lampu menyala. Manusia seorang dia duduk di ujung bilik. You know? And that's the kind of mentality, nothing wrong with it, but we are told to do that. So I quickly say, look, I don't want this other light, put 2 switches. Right? And this is something that you must be sensitive about. Nobody is going to tell you. Right? Macam mana kita nak padam lampu, bila kita nak pasang aircon, bila kita nak pasang apa ni, how do you dress, all this has something to do with that education for sustainable development. Yeah? And this is a mindset change yang kita kena bawa kepada pelajar kita. When the students walk out of the room, do they switch off the lights ataupun tidak? No, ataupun ada pula satu lagi hamba Allah akan padam lampu. I think that's not the kind of living that we should be adopting in the university and part of the education. Right? Now, what does it mean therefore in this particular case? We need now to write the new narrative. And this is what the bengkel is all about dengan Sohail. We all now have got the new narrative of how to move forward from the old USIM to the new USIM. Yeah? But the new narrative is macam juga kita katakan, what sort of world do we want? Masa hadapan macam mana yang kita nak? Bergantung kepada kita dan bagaimana kita now, move to that world that we want to create. And we have done that. Yeah? We have done the backcasting, we have done the forecasting, we have done all those things, and insyaAllah, I think we'll put it into a context. Yeah? Tapi dari segi pendidikan, it has to meet the sustainable development goal, and therefore that education is important. Yeah? Education for sustainable development menjadi tunggak kepada perubahan ataupun naratif baru yang hendak kita tulis. Apa yang kita katakan naratif baru itu? Naratif baru itu secara umumnya adalah bergerak kepada keadaan yang tidak lestari kepada keadaan yang lestari. Okey? Maknanya pemikiran here and now, as I can fulfill my KPI today for my promotion, cukuplah. That's a kind of thinking. Yeah? Kalau buat hari ni, untuk hari ni cukuplah. That's not the kind of thing. That's an unsustainable thinking. It's just about consumption. Yeah? And the consumption is what? Kita minta, kita buang. Kita minta, kita buang. Kita tidak menggunakan sepenuhnya. Makanan is a good example. Yeah? Pulau Pinang saja tahun lalu membuang makanan equivalent to 4 jumbo jet. Pulau Pinang saja. Ya, sebab tu bila makan raya semalam, saya bawa sebanyak mana yang dibagi, saya bawa lah. Kurang-kurang I have helped to reduce the pembaziran if there is any. Yeah? But we don't need more than we need. And this is an issue. Okay? We want, minta, buang, minta, buang, minta, buang. And I think this is an issue that will not happen. So, maknanya we are maintaining the status quo. Apa yang dulu orang buat, kita ikut saja. Kalau ada perubahan pun sikit-sikit je. Ya, tidak ada impak, dan ini kerana kita hanya memikirkan diri kita sendiri. Makanan yang terbuang itu kita tidak fikirkan untuk orang lain. Ya, untuk orang miskin, untuk yang fakir, untuk yang, we don't think about that. This is the reason why it is like that. Ya. And therefore the learning bagi kita is basically not a holistic learning and not a complete learning. The university needs to do a policy shift. Yeah, the policy will make sure that the imbalance are reduced, the tensions will be reduced. And what is this? Almost an opposite. Kalau kita berfikir tentang hari ini, kita nak berfikir tentang macam kita kata tadi, masa hadapan 1, 2, 3 generasi. Mana yang kita boleh conserve dan preserve, kita simple conserve dan preserve. Tak ada salahnya kalau kita pakai benda itu 3-4 kali. It doesn't have to be right all the time or new all the time. We are used to use, reuse, reduce and recycle. I will always add the first one is refuse. Di USM, bila kita beli komputer, kita kata, I just want the computer, you keep the plastics. Don't give me the plastic because I don't want the plastics. So, dia hantar komputer tanpa plastik, tak ada jadi beban kita nak menghilangkan plastik pula. Yeah. So whatever you can refuse, you refuse. Yeah. I've got 3 shoes now. Do I need to buy another one? I probably do not need to buy another one. I will refuse that. That's a mentality yang budak-budak sekarang tidak ada. Yeah. Keluar aja iPhone 6.0 dia dah mula dah. Macam mana nak beli 6.0 ni? Walaupun 5.0 dia masih baik. And I ask them, why do you buy 6.0? Tan Sri ada standby button. Yeah. What is so important standby button? Bila kita tidur, kalau kita terpaksa switch off the telephone, bila call datang, kita tak boleh jawab. You are sleeping anyway. You nak jawab macam mana? Yeah. So we need to put on standby button so that they can call. The call can come in. You know, and for that you pay another 1,000 odd ringgit. And it's a kind of very short-term mentality that you've got, and the students are into this. Yeah. Ada yang 3 handphone, saya selalu kata, you got only 2 years, why do you need 3 handphones? You know, and these are issues that the younger generations are facing, and we need to re-educate them how to refuse. Yeah? And therefore, the status quo must change. Ini cerita status quo ni bagi kita very, very, very sensitive. Bila kata change, challenge the status quo, yang politically kita dah kata, dia say you are incorrect. Maknanya kita nak menukar kerajaan. That is a kind of thinking. Nobody wants to talk about changing the status quo. We are talking about changing status quo in our environment. Let's forget about kerajaan. We are not interested. We need to change the way we manage things and how we actually do things in our own campus. And therefore, changing the status quo must be transformational. Yeah, and there's a definition for that. And that, therefore, it has to be community-based. Seramai orang yang boleh akan benefit about it. And therefore, the unlearning, the relearning, and the co-learning. The co-learning bagi saya extremely important. Kita belajar balik dengan masyarakat sekitar kita. And that's why, again, the Kampung project becomes important. They have got the knowledge that we do not have. And therefore, we need to learn from them. We are not the best person as far as this is concerned. And the co-learning means we need to build relationships. Yeah? Kita mesti mewujudkan satu perhubungan yang dikatakan kolaboratif. Yeah? Kebanyakan kampung-kampung, bila saya pergi sebagai Naib Chancellor dulu, dia kata, dulu dah datang dah. Sekarang ni nak apa pula? Ya, dulu dah ambil darah dah. Sekarang ni nak apa pula? Ya, sampai dia katakan, dulu ambil darah saya, macam kita ni mencekik darah dia. Ya, because we didn't return apa yang kita ambil pada dia. The knowledge ke, the impact is certainly better, but even the knowledge kita tak bagi tahu dia. And I think the last case, I don't know whether you read my column last week tentang kes arwah Takif ni. Yeah. Suddenly dia meninggal kerana leptospirosis, kencing tikus. Keluarganya tak tahu pun. Yeah, it was just mentioned in the media and the family doesn't know about it. Yeah, tapi bila nak exhume the body, kita pergi pada family dia. Saya nak keluarkan mayat ni balik for autopsy nombor 2. When it's done, I forget about the family, I just announce to the world, this is my finding. I mean, that is almost irresponsible bagi saya. Yeah? So that kind of a collaboration, I think is something that we need to tell and practice in our lifestyle in as far as work is concerned. Why is this important? Because the policy shift will make the mindset shift. And Sohail mentioned this. The news stories will change the mindset. If we don't have the news stories, the mindset will remain as it is. And the bigger problem is that mindset problem. And if we can address that, I think we are okay. Now, I just want to go very quickly. Where does the mindset change now? Yeah? Mengapa universiti kita berlaku dalam keadaan sekarang ini seperti ini? One is, kalau kita lihat universiti dulu, Universiti Al-Karayin, yang Nalanda yang dulu, they are all communal university. Universiti wujud kerana masyarakatnya. Universiti itu menjadi conduit untuk membantu masyarakat. Ya. Orang-orang di situ dipanggil community of scholars. Dia keluar, dia memberi ilmu kepada masyarakat dia, membantu masyarakat, belajar pada masyarakat. That is the purpose of a university. At least at that particular point in time. Right? Now, very quickly I will move to when the world change, kita dah ada sekarang ini modernization, yeah, the concept of nation states take over the communal punya function, especially after the Second World War. Selepas Perang Dunia Kedua, apabila negara banyak porak-poranda di Eropah khususnya, setiap negara sekarang ini nak membangunkan masyarakatnya semula. And therefore, membuat universiti sebagai institusi kebangsaan. Therefore, kita dapat konsep universiti kebangsaan. The national university. That wasn't there. The communal university doesn't belong to anybody. So, kalau kita lihat di Andalusia misalnya, everybody comes. Yeah? It is not just part of Cordoba or Spain. It's a global university already in that particular concept. National university comes in, kita ada, every country now has got a national university. Kita ada universiti kebangsaan kita masing-masing. Fokusnya adalah untuk membangunkan negara dan masyarakat dalam negara itu saja. You cut off yourself from the global link. Yeah? But when the nation state collapsed through capitalism and neoliberal ideas, basically the market takes over. We are in this phase now. So the market will tell you what to teach and how to teach. Falsafah tak penting, kesusastraan tak penting, agama tak penting. Yeah? Yang penting ekonomi, commerce, teknologi, semua ni penting. Pasal apa? Ini boleh dipasarkan. Siapa nak baca, siapa nak jadi ahli falsafah, nobody can, they're not marketable. Yeah? And so on. So now the market is taking over, and that's why the university becomes a gedung for economic prosperity. And that's where your KPI comes in. And that's where your ranking comes in. All these are stories that are interrelated with one another. It just doesn't come because somebody think about it. It has a plan dalam konteks. Here in the late 20th century, we have moved. Now the market has collapsed. This is why we are very important to look at this new type of university, which is again global, but coming back to the communal sort of responsibility. So nampak macam satu kitaran. We are going back to where it belongs. But provided only we understand what sustainable development is all about and how to move into generations and needs and quality of life and the balanced ecosystem like it was. Yeah. So kalau kita miss this opportunity, then I think we are going to rot in the old sort of paradigm. And this is where I find internationally the Muslims are not contributing enough. Yeah, we are not contributing enough, and therefore the opportunity to create a new university in the spirit of the Muslims are not there. Yeah, and this is why I think we need to work on this very, very carefully. What is the new sustainable development goal? Kita ada 3 sekarang ini, yang kita faham. Now the new one, seperti kata-kata, ada 17. Dulu ada 8, sekarang ada 17. Yeah. How they come about to 17, I'm not quite sure, but this is now accepted as we need to work on the 17 goals, and this is quite a challenge in this particular aspect. I'm not going to talk about that now, but what I want to talk about is the general mission, the sustainable development. Kalau dulu kita ada 3 aja, people, including the culture, planet and prosperity, yeah? People, ecology and economy. Under the sustainable development, kita ada 3 lagi. One is dignity, marwah. One is justice, keadilan. And one is partnership. Yeah? How do we work with one another in this particular context? Now, marwah, justice, tidak ada KPI. Tell me what is the KPI of marwah. Tell me what's the KPI of justice. We are not able to give one. Yeah? Maknanya kalau kita hanya bekerja untuk KPI, we will miss dignity, we will miss justice, we will also miss partnership. And this is where I think the mindset shift again needs to come in. And this is where I think again Islam has got understanding of what marwah is all about, justice is all about, and ukhuwah, the way we work. That is an opportunity bagi saya lah untuk kita masuk dan menggeledah apa yang dipanggil sebagai sustainable development dan mengungkapkan kembali dalam konteks yang kita faham dalam dunia Islam. I'm going to demonstrate. This is the 17 goals in a different light, yeah. But just to let you know, these are the 6 things, and it's about the world that we want. Yeah? That is what sustainability now as it stands today. The agenda mengatakan under the sustainable development mengatakan kepada semua orang hanya satu dunia saja. So America are asked to give back the 4 worlds that they have used. Europe has used 3 worlds. They are asked to give back 2 to the world, and they are not doing this. And certainly they don't want to do this. Yeah? Kalau dia biasa dengan kemewahan dia tidak akan mau. And this is why the war is fought. To be honest with you, they want to sustain their status quo. Yeah? And this is why the war is fought over many things, so that they sustain their status quo in the context of resources. Statement by the DG of UNESCO, UN pada itu very clear. We can't all swim if we can't all swim together, we will sink. Right? Dia kata there is no plan B because there's no planet B. So there's one planet, but as I've mentioned to you, one planet but many worlds. Given a demonstration, ini orang ni dengan air laut ni yang cantik, seolah-olah satu kemewahan bagi dia. Yeah? It's one world by itself. The second world, ada juga air, tapi dia tak boleh berenang. Hanya duduk di pantai saja. Yeah? Nah, maknanya the wealth is not enough for him or her to actually use for their own benefit. But the last world is even worse. Bukan saja tak ada air, tapi penuh dengan all these things that we see around us. Yeah? Kemiskinannya, rasuahnya, pencemarannya, and all those things that is not polluting their life. Okay? So the question that we always ask, yes, one planet, but why 3 worlds? There must be one planet and therefore one world. And how do you come to that world is something that sustainable development will need to look at. The imbalance, according to one professor, Professor Nui Orakes, dengan Eric Conway, who is a journalist, mengatakan we are coming to the end of the Western civilization. Dalam buku ini, kalau kita baca, small book of about 14 pages, dia mengatakan the date will be 2093. Even before the century is over, the Western civilization will collapse because of the condition of sustainable development. Now, kalau kita baca buku ini dan kita percaya that the year 2093 the world will collapse, as a Muslims, what do? We certainly need to prepare when the world collapses. This is my alternative. Yeah? And we need to prepare it now, because it takes a long time to prepare this. Right? Bila world to collapse besok, kita masih tercengak-cangak dan doesn't know what to do and doesn't know also what this is all about. I think we will miss the boat again. And that's why I'm very passionate about this. Already the prediction, dia juga kritik tentang science. The science has failed. And that's why the world is collapsed. So, for those of you who believe quote-unquote Islamic science, you need to reinterpret the science. And because the science, according to her, has failed to arrive at this particular point that we talk about. So, there's many things. If the library, Jasmine or Disney, have you got this book? If you don't have, can you buy one? And then we duplicate and then get everybody to read it. A very enlightening book. Orang Barat mengkritik civilizationnya sendiri. Yeah? Where it has failed. And they kata we are going into a second dark ages in this particular context. Yeah? Just to give you a complete example, I will not talk about it. Therefore, we are developing a new science now called the sustainability science. Jadi maknanya sustainable development ini ataupun kelestarian ini juga ada sainsnya sendiri yang berbeza dengan sains yang kita faham. Ya? Dia sainsnya melihat tentang perkara-perkara yang besar. The global system, the human system, the social system, and how these things will interact with one another to create a bigger problem. Like I say, if you're a physicist, you'll not be able to work on this. If you're a scientist, you'll not be able to work on this until you work with other people around you. And this is where I think the change will come in the context of knowledge. Okay? So far, I have talked to you about sustainable development from the frame of the global knowledge that we know. Yeah? How do I reframe it in the Islamic perspective? 4 elements of planet, policy, people, and prosperity in a balance. That's what in the essence it is. Yeah? Meeting the needs of today and tomorrow, meeting the quality of life, and also meeting the balance. Yeah? These are the keywords that we want to look at. The purpose is for mankind to be able to live peacefully in a just, equitable, and balanced world. That is what the purpose is all in sustainability. Dari segi purpose ini, dari segi Islam, there's no difference, saya rasa. We want to live peacefully, we want to live in a balanced, equitable, and just world. And therefore, the idea of sustainable development dengan Islam tidak banyak berbeza. Hanya mungkin metodologinya ataupun operationalnya. How do we then get into this? And this is what, when I was in FKP, we were talking about it, and we try to find out, yeah, di mana letaknya maqasid syariah. Okay, dalam maqasid kita ada kehidupan, akal, keturunan, dan kita ada juga harta. Okay, itu cara tradisionalnya kita memahaminya. Tapi kalau kita bercakap kehidupan dalam sustainable development, dia bukan saja kehidupan tapi kehidupan bermaruah. There's dignity involved. Ya, manusia hidup, orang Islam hidup, tapi dia mesti hidup bermaruah. So dignity and life can go together. Alright. Kita bercakap tentang akal, bukan akal saja itu, tapi akal yang berfikir. Ya, ini diminta dalam Al-Quran, kalau tak salah saya, reflect, understand. Right? As the reasoning part. Prosperity, kita bukan bercakap tentang anak cucu saja, kita bercakap tentang keturunan. Long time from now. Ya. Dan juga wealth, kita bukan bercakap saja tentang apa yang ada, komputer saya, kereta saya, handphone saya. Kita bercakap tentang wealth dari segi apa yang Allah bagi kita. Udaranya, airnya, hujannya, ya, sumbernya. These are wealth that we are the custodian of. Kita mempunyai amanah atas. So that concept kalau kita ambil, kita boleh find kedudukannya. Ya. Planet itu kalau kita ambil manusia atau kehidupan, that's part of it. Polisi ini mungkin datang daripada akal. Manusia dari segi keturunan, prosperity dari segi wealth. There is this resemblance that I will try and argue with you. But we have got one more thing. So it's just not the akal. We've got another thing where we call faith. Bagi orang bukan Islam, how do we argue this? Kita kata spirituality. I will say spirituality. We don't have to say Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, but I say spirituality at that level. And that's where the cult comes in. Yeah? And this is where I think we begin to look at it from the Al-Ghazali understanding of what this is all about. From the cult leadership punya model. Yeah? But the reality is dalam pendidikan kita yang ada sekarang ini, walaupun kita tahu bahawa bayi ataupun janin itu awal-awal dalam minggu-minggu yang awal sudah mula ada heartbeat dan otaknya tidak langsung terbina, tapi pendidikan kita hanya menumpukan kepada asuhan minda saja. Ya? Bukan saja dia tidak mengambil kira tentang kalbu ataupun hati tadi, dia juga sebenarnya merosotkan. Ya? So masuk generasi sekarang ini, kita dapati this question of kalbu does not exist. Our role bagi saya is how to balance this up. Yeah? And balancing this up is one of the part of sustainable development that is not taught by anybody. We have the opportunity to articulate this. Right? You need to sustain between these two seeds of intellect. Let me diagrammatically try to show you this. Yeah? So kita ada life, kita ada progeny, kita ada wealth, kita ada intellect, kita ada adin. Yeah? And that's a maqasid for us. I would want to devise now what I call the quintuple helix model. Kita ada the triple helix model, kita ada the quadruple helix model. Kalau kita ambil quintuple ini maknanya 5. Kalau elemen maqasid itu kita boleh conceptualizekan dalam satu model. Dan juga quintuple helix, I try to draw as many as possible. menunjukkan kaitan satu sama lain. Okay? Kalau tidak ada akal, kita tidak akan dapat hidup sempurna. Kalau kita tidak ada hidup sempurna, kita mungkin tidak akan dapat generasi yang baik. Yeah? All this, how does this get intertwined? How does this become a matrix? How does this become an assessment tool? How does this become, a platform for us to think? And this is, I think, the issue that all of us need to think of in terms of the concept of Maqasid al-Syariah. Yeah? How are these 5-6 things are met through the Maqasid al-Syariah, creating a model, maybe a different model than this one. Alright? So kalau kita ambil the quintuple helix model, bagi saya we can start to expand. Kalau kita bercakap tentang life, kita bercakap tentang life of all species. Bukan saja kehidupan manusia, tetapi haiwannya, pokoknya, the vegetationnya, and so on and so forth. Maybe I can put the birds as a representative of that species. Right? Segala benda yang dicipta oleh Tuhan, yang kita juga bertanggungjawab atasnya. So the question of anjing tak boleh bela anjing ini becomes an issue. I remember baru ni ada orang kata dia bela anjing, orang suruh dia bertaubat. Where do we stand on this? Yeah, when we talk about Maqasid, where do we stand on that? The university needs to play a role and articulate this when we talk about sustainable development. Natural resources, kalau kita cakap wealth, we talk about natural resources. So, I will just symbolize this as a tree. Ya, sudah tentu di bawah bumi itu banyak lagi natural resources yang kita boleh expand the whole idea, ya, dalam konteks ini. Kalau kita bercakap tentang progeny, kita cakap tentang generation. I have no graphics on that, but generation maknanya daripada anak sekecil-kecilnya sampai ke apa tu, setua-tuanya. Ya. And when we talk about intellect, we are talking about the balance between the qalb and the akal. How do you balance this? Right? And if that happens, then I think we can move on to the idea of spirituality. And that then will bring a different picture altogether. So if you see this picture saja, dengan the first picture that I showed you, this picture is more exciting. Ada pokoknya, ada burungnya, ada cahayanya, ada imbangannya, and so on and so forth. And that's where I think sustainable development in the context of Maqasid al-Syariah has a lot more to offer. Has a lot more to offer in terms of its articulation, explanation, the narration that we need to write. And I think we must write this. Yeah, we must write this. I was asked to write, and I write one paper for a journal. The editor come back to me. Dia kata, Zul, this is the first time I'm reading Islam from this perspective. Yeah, not just quoting the Quran, which is important, but the new conceptualization of Maqasid beyond the individual, into the community and into the universal community. Not just your own Muslim community, but the non-Muslim also can use it now. I think that's the kind of role that we need to play in this particular context. Yeah? So I go back and rujuk to the Tuan Guru, the Sir Auda, who comes here so many times. Yeah? Dan dia mengatakan dia menggunakan istilah-istilah yang cukup menarik. Dia tak menggunakan Maqasid syariah, dia menggunakan necessities. Ya, sebagai landasannya yang mengatakan bahawa ada 5 tadi. The faith, instead of using life, dia guna soul, wealth, yeah, instead of the intellect, dia guna mind, instead of guna progeny, dia guna offspring, the same thing. I mean, the English words are flexible in the particular. The 5 elements yang kita katakan tadi. How does that bring to that? How does that interact with one another? Is it a hierarchical way? Is it a helix way? Is it horizontal? Is it vertical? How does it relate to one? How does it support one another? How does it link with one another? Yeah? And this is where I begin to see, kalau kita lihat the necessities dalam 17 SDG tadi tu, kita boleh pilih dari segi Islamnya apa yang terutama penting bagi kita. We don't need to do all the 17 in one go, but in terms of necessity, yang penting ni apa dia? Poverty, food, health, what? Education. You decide at the end of the day, what is it that we need to work on as a university sebagai tak. Maknanya pelajar-pelajar kita mesti ada semua ni. We cannot just be talking about this and our pelajar tidak ada. Yeah? Kalau kemiskinan, tentu kan pelajar-pelajar kita are off that. Kalau saya tempat tinggal, tentukan dia ada tempat tinggal. That will be kita perjuangan, because it is based on the maqasid. It is not just an assumption of an economic sort of agenda. Yeah? We can think about that. Yeah? And then we can start to look at, dia mengatakan the hierarchical purpose. This is where I start to be a little bit different from Auda. I don't believe it's a hierarchy. I think it is something that must be worked together. Satu, misalnya tidak ada kemiskinan, one hierarchy, then you need to, it's almost like a Maslow thinking. I don't think that is one. I think we need to work all in one go. Yeah? Tidak ada makan, tidak ada tempat tinggal, tidak ada baju. Kita boleh makan dulu, pakai baju, kemudian ada tempat tinggal. No. I think all these things must go together. So the hierarchy to me does not work in that particular nature. Something that we can debate on. Yeah? That kind of hierarchy, maybe it works on a different in the different platform bila dia bercakap tentang gitu, hajaniat misalnya. Yeah. What is the next one? Bila dah selesai the first group of issues, apa yang perlu kita lakukan? Mungkin we can think about what is that? Dari segi ikan di laut, dari segi unggas di hutan, dari segi climate change, because that's not immediate for us. Yeah. Once we've fulfilled this, and we can talk about something else. And certainly later on, we can talk about something else again. Yeah. And dari segi infrastructure-nya, dari segi sustainability-nya, and so on and so forth. So we have an opportunity to decide, rather than ambil 17, but we have to decide what do we need to do. Tahun pertama apa kita perlu buat, tahun kedua apa perlu buat, tahun ketiga perlu buat, sehingga kan kesemuanya ini kita dapat sempurnakan, tetapi atas dasar maqasid, bukan atas dasar hanya ekonomi. Ya, bukan atas dasar hanya untuk menepati satu global agenda yang disuruh oleh United Nations. And that's why the statement yesterday made by the Deputy Pusat Islam is very important. Yeah? Where there's a hadith in this, where there's a Quranic verses in this, how can you build it so that it becomes comprehensive in the total Islamic perspective? It's one possibility, yeah? But I'm certain there are many other possibilities the way we start with the moment we talked about it. And therefore yang penting bagi saya bila kita nak sampai ke sini ni, ya, kita nak decide, kita memerlukan nilai-nilai yang tertentu. Dan nilai-nilai itu bukan sahaja nilai yang datang daripada minda, juga nilai yang datang daripada hati dan akhlak kita. How do we then decide on this particular issue? And this is where I think the discussion becomes important. How do you balance the mind and the soul? How do you balance the heart and the brain? Yeah? How do you balance the emotion and the behavior? How do you balance the tangibles and the intangibles? We just don't want to talk about the KPI, whereas the non-KPI is on. Yeah? Semalam siapa Jamil cakap tentang the KIP based KPI. And that is our version in trying to put in the values. Kita mengatakan mesti ada nilai dulu baru kita bangunkan KPI ni. Yeah? Kalau tidak ada nilai, the KPI becomes kosong. And therefore kita boleh meniru. Bila saya bercakap dengan USM dulu, I say we want 2 journal articles. Somebody says I can give you 10 times 3, provided you don't ask me how I do it. Yeah, and I created the idea of the turn it in. Sekarang pelajar-pelajar kita kena turn it in, supaya assignment dia, kita yakin dia tidak meniru. Yang meyakinkan kita mesin, bukan kita. Tapi pelajar kita pandai. Sebelum dia turn it in dulu. Dia tengok, oh ini dah 70% ni, merah. Dia betulkan 70% tu. Dia 25% acceptable. Dia baru bagi kita. Kita kata pelajar kita ni bagus betul. Yeah? We are cheating our students, and I told them in one, your turn it in is training our student to be first class liars. Yeah? Kita menggalakkan dia menjadi pembohong nombor 1. Sebab tu bila dia keluar besok, bila saya bercakap dalam mesyuarat SPRM, ya, kita mengatakan mengapa kita tak boleh temu duga orang dan mendapatkan orang yang betul-betul integriti menduduki tempat-tempat yang tertentu. SPRM kata transisi itu tak ada masalah. Masalahnya bila dia dah dapat tempat tu. Ya? Mencari tempat tak masalah. Bila dia dapat tempat tu, baru dia dirasuk. And how do you deal with that problem? Yeah? And this is why I find this whole idea of maqasid becomes an important thing for us. How do we miss this in our education system is something that I don't know how to answer this. I'm not aware of this before I come to Usim. So my conclusion will be this. Takat ini bila kita bercakap tentang pendidikan is all about economic well-being saja. Yeah, and that includes the word modal insan and so on and so forth. You know how much I don't like the word modal insan. So lagi kita naik, lagi kita boleh jana, lagi kita ni, it's okay. Right? Itu kerja kita sekarang. Seolah-olah kita ni macam bank nak menjana duit pula. Yeah, which is fine I think. But what happened in that process, kita punya nilai merosot. Yeah, that virtues go down the drain and nobody talks about this. Yeah, berapa banyak rasuahnya and so on and so forth, tidak ada orang bercerita. Dalam satu conference di Ghana bulan Oktober ini ada satu sesi corruption in higher education. And it's a global phenomenon now. It's not only Malaysia. It's a new thing that we are beginning to get into. Yeah? So how do you create that balance? Now we talk about kemenangan ketakseimbangan. Yeah, and good university. So of course Harvard is good. Harvard has got 5 planets to back them up. You know, give me 5 planets, I'll beat Harvard tomorrow. Not a difficult thing to do. Yeah. So this is the issue of imbalance. We are measuring people out of the imbalance. And we say this ranking becomes good. And therefore University of Malaya bawalah segala Bangladesh yang masuk, nakkan namanya international. Yeah, international, right? But you just take anybody for the skin color so that you can get the score of that marks. Yeah? And I told this story in one private university yang minta saya bantu dia. Dia dapat nombor 350. Dan dia kata, Tan Sri, can you move this up? I say, what sort of investment are you making? Dia kata, nak dapat nombor 350 ni kami terpaksa bayar QS 1.3 juta. Tapi tahun ini QS datang balik kata kalau nak sampai juga di tempat 350 tu mesti bayar dia 2.5 juta. Kata we are not prepared to pay. If we are not prepared to pay, we will go to number 400. QS kata you go down number 400. Bila dia go down number 400, pelajar-pelajar tak mau masuk dah. Yeah. And this is the issue of corruption bagi saya in this particular context when you talk about ranking and nobody wants to talk about it. Yeah. So that balance of imbalance, so I think needs to be created, and to create is bagi saya is to move back the value change upwards that way. All right, and to have that to happen is basically where we talk about values, where we talk about the cult, where we talk about the maqasid syariah. And how do we gel this together? At the end of the day, yeah, we want to have this balance of, it could be akli-nakli, I don't know, it's still a controversial thing, but there must be a balance somewhere, right? And the cult leadership is trying to make and bridge that balance using the Al-Ghazali model, so that at the end of the day, we can work on that maqasid syariah. I will not use it because it becomes, you know, very Islamic in that particular sense, and how do you create them in the context of Islam a sustainable leadership. Okay? So I hope within this roughly 1 hour, I've demonstrated to you the importance of this global goal called sustainable development yang kita tak mahu tercicik. Yeah? I've demonstrated to you that it has relevance dengan Islam. Yeah? Tapi nukilan Islamnya, penulisannya, penerangannya, penjelasannya, definasinya tidak ada. Kita perlu lakukan itu. Dan ketiganya yang paling penting adalah untuk mengungkapkan agenda-agenda global seumpama ini dalam perspektif kita, supaya kita dapat mendahului dan juga dapat mencorakkan kepimpinan yang akan datang sekurang-kurangnya di peringkat kita, kalaupun tidak di peringkat global. Tapi saya percayalah dalam konteks ini ada orang akan mempercayai bahawa konsep ini lebih baik daripada konsep yang apa dibincangkan sekarang. Sekarang ini diperbahaskan, sekarang ini konsep sustainable development yang dibawa sekarang ini sudah menjadi satu alat penjajahan. It becomes a colonizing sort of element now. Kerana kita disuruh oleh dunia barat membuatnya. Give a good example. Sunway University sudah membangunkan satu pusat yang bernama Jeffrey Sachs Center of Sustainability Center. Yeah. Our objection is very simple. Jeffrey Sachs is not a Malaysian. Dia akan membawa nilai-nilai Amerikanya kepada kita untuk memahami apa itu sustainable development. Right? Dan dia diberi 30 juta US oleh Sunway University. Yeah. So later on Sunway akan menjadi satu pusat yang terkenal, tapi makna sustainable development masih dari ala barat, ala Amerika. Dia tidak membawa ala Malaysia, apalagi ala Melayu, apalagi ala Islam. Yeah. And that's the kind of competition they have had. UKM has been doing this, USM has been doing this, UPM has been doing this for years. But we are not recognized. We are not given even 30,000 ringgit, let alone 30 million US. That's what Jeffrey Sachs says. And therefore the competition will never be equal. But we will work on a different platform, and I hope we can make a difference in this particular context. Yeah? So saya berhenti di situ. Kalau ada apa-apa pertanyaan, ada apa-apa yang nak diperdebatkan, I'm open to this. I think we have got another maybe 15 minutes or half an hour. So that you understand this and you work on this. Bila kita bercakap nanti lepas ini, bagaimana kita nak masukkan ini dalam konteks futures yang dibawa Profesor Suhail ni, kita akan lebih jelas. Where sustainable development stays in this particular context. Right? So terima kasih banyak. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih kepada Y.Bhg Tan Sri atas perkongsian yang amat menarik. Kita beri tukan sekali lagi kepada Tan Sri. Alhamdulillah, seperti saya katakan tadi, satu perkongsian yang amat mantap, menerobos pemikiran dari cakna pemikiran yang berbeza, pengisian input yang amat menarik, dan insyaAllah apa yang Tan Sri hasratkan kepada warga USIM untuk sama-sama membina USIM dengan cara ataupun kerangka yang baru, kita sama-sama dokong dan sokong. InsyaAllah kita doa mudah-mudahan dengan berkat hari Jumaat dan usaha semua pihak ini, apa yang kita impikan, apa yang kita realisasikan, kita bentuk satu USIM yang baru dengan pendekatan yang lebih baik dan juga warna yang lebih menarik.